What if the biggest story in our history isn't going to arrive the way we always imagined it? No emergency broadcast, no world leaders standing shoulder to shoulder, and no one coming up to the podium and saying, "We are not alone." Because the more I've been watching this story lately, the more I keep coming back to the same thought. What if disclosure isn't something that's about to happen? What if it's happening right now? Just not in the way that we expected it. It's not clean, it's not happening all at once, and there's no giant undeniable reveal. But imagine if it was happening through podcasts, weird media comments, political hints, classified language, maybe even film releases, symbolic dates, and a whole bunch of events that don't even mean much on their own until you put them all next to each other. And once you do all that, this whole thing starts to feel very different. Because over the last few months, there's been way too many strange moments. Too many comments from people in power, too many breadcrumbs, and too many oddly timed stories. And tonight, I want to sit down and go through this with you properly. Not as some polished, we have all the answers kind of documentary or speech, but as a real-time breakdown. Because I honestly think we may be watching something unfold here. I'm just not sure people realize how big it could actually be. Alright, so before we get into all this, I want to explain what this series is. This series will be called Decoded, and it's going to be a little bit different to the main Existence Unknown episodes, because the main episodes, they're still here. They're still happening, they're still going to be the deep dives, polished breakdowns, and full investigations. That's not changing. But Decoded is where we do something else. This is where we sit down and take a look at the stories that are still unfolding. This is where we talk through some breaking developments, current events, weird patterns, theories that are starting to gain traction, and stories that may not be fully formed yet. But all of this stuff is worth paying attention to. And honestly, I want this series to be shaped by you guys as well. So I want your feedback on this one. I want to know if you like this format. Do you want to see it more raw, more evidence heavy? If you want to see it more often? Do you want more of my opinions to be included in these episodes? Or do you want to see more clips and more breakdowns? Because this is the first one, we've got plenty of time to shape this together and find a format that really works for both of us. So if you've got thoughts on the style, the pacing and the presentation, or any of the topics that you'd like me to cover next, please make sure that you drop them in the comments below. Because this series should feel like we're all in this investigation together. And I think that's what's going to make it a lot of fun. And also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, guess what? This is a great time to do that. Make sure that you leave a like at the end of this video if you like the format, and leave any comments that can help me out with the next and coming episodes. Because if this disclosure story keeps escalating the way it's been escalating, we're going to be all over it. Alright, let's start with the moment that really helped kick this conversation back into gear. Barack Obama. Now, Obama's talked around this topic before. He's joked about it, he's danced around it, he's acknowledged that there's things that the public doesn't know. But this is the latest round of comments, and it kind of hits a little bit differently. Because when he appeared recently and made those now circulating remarks about aliens and what the government knows, a lot of people treated it like another funny former president moment. But I don't think it's that simple. Here's the clip, let me know what you think.
Here. Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility, unless there's this enormous conspiracy and they hid it from the President of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Now, Obama's not careless. He doesn't usually just throw words around for no reason. He's measured. He's polished. He understands how language lands. And whether you like him politically or not, he's not someone who typically sounds accidental. So when he talks around this subject, I think it's worth slowing down and actually asking, what's he actually saying? Because there's a huge difference between aliens and there's also things I know and I can't say directly. And with Obama, that line has always felt very blurry. So what do you guys think? Do you think presidents get told the truth? Seriously. Because for decades, people have assumed that if there's some kind of hidden UFO or non-human intelligence program, surely the president would know. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if the president only gets a part of the story, a filtered version, or nothing meaningful at all? And honestly, if you look at the way some former presidents have spoken about this topic over the years, you can see that kind of tension. And this is where I'd love your take, because I go back and forth on this. Part of me thinks if there is a big secret, the president would know. But then the other part of me thinks maybe that's exactly the part that we're getting wrong. Maybe the system is so compartmentalized that even the most powerful elected person in the world is still just outside the room. And if that's true, that's actually more disturbing than the UFO story itself. Because it means that there's politically unelected systems of secrecy operating above the level of public government. And once you start thinking about that, you realize that this story might not just be about aliens and UFOs. It's likely about power. Who has it, who controls it, and who's allowed to know the truth. So let me ask you this. Do you think the presidents are fully read in? Or do you think they're just managed like all of us? Because I genuinely think that question sits right at the center of the whole thing. Now, this is the part where the story stops getting interesting and starts getting a little bit weird. Because once you move away from Obama's comments and start looking at what happened around Trump, the timeline starts to feel real and very deliberate. And I want to be careful here because I'm not saying we've got proof of anything, but I am saying this. There are enough moving parts here to take seriously. So let's lay it out. We've got Lara Trump now publicly suggesting that Donald Trump has something prepared, something ready, something that sounds like it might relate to this topic. Now, on its own, this could just be vague political hype. But then it gets layered with another claim, this time from UK filmmaker Mark Christopher Lee, who says an insider, who we now know to be Bigelow, told him Trump allegedly has a speech prepared for the 79th anniversary of Roswell. That's on July 8 of this year. And if true, you'll have to admit, that's one hell of a date to choose. Because Roswell just isn't another UFO case. Roswell is a symbol. It's the myth, the trigger point, the original fracture in any official story. So if somebody wanted to reveal something tied to this topic, Roswell is not just a meaningful date, it's the date. And this is where I think people sometimes make a mistake with stories like this. They say, well, there's no official proof, so it means nothing. But that's not really how narrative conditioning works. Because if governments or people adjacent to power were ever going to prepare the public for a reality-shifting truth, would they just dump it all at once? Or would they start priming people first? And here a rumour there, a symbolic date, a public comment, a soft test of public reaction. Because if that's what's happening, then that's what we're seeing now, and it makes a whole lot more sense. Now let me ask you, if a disclosure speech were really coming, would Roswell be the date that you would choose? Or would it be too on the nose, do you think? Because honestly, if something does happen around that date, people are going to lose their minds. And if nothing happens, that tells us something too. I think even the crazier part of this story would be if we got Trump actually on a podium, standing outside Area 51 and giving a "We Are Not Alone" speech on the anniversary of Roswell. I think it would send the actual world into meltdown. So I want you to let me know if you're enjoying this episode so far, and if you are, please leave us a like. It does so much for the channel. Now this is where it just stops being timing and rumour, and it starts getting a little harder to brush off. Because Trump gets asked directly about Obama's comments during a media scrum on Air Force One. And again, out of all the ways he could have answered that question, he chose one of the most interesting possible responses. Let's have a look at the clip.
Something that got a lot of attention this week. Barack Obama said that aliens are real. Have you seen any evidence of non-human visitors to Earth?
Well, he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. You know?
So aliens are real?
Well, I don't know if they're real or not. I can tell you he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. He made a big mistake. He took it out of classified information. No, I don't have an opinion on it. I never talk about it. A lot of people do. A lot of people believe it. Do you believe it, Peter?
Well, the president can declassify anything that he wants to, so
Well,
if
maybe
you
I'll
want
get
to
him
make
out
an
of trouble.
announcement.
I may get him out of trouble by declassifying.
We know illegally.
So he says it's classified. Now just sit with that for a second, because that's not nothing. That's not the same as it's ridiculous. That's not the same as no idea what he's talking about. That's not the same as it's all nonsense. Instead, the framing becomes there is information, and that information is not public. That's a very different thing. And whether Trump is being fully serious, half serious, or just Trump being Trump, the effect is still huge. Because once something at that level starts publicly using language like that, it changes how the topic is perceived. It stops being fringe again, and that matters. Because for years, this topic has lived in a weird space, too serious to ignore, or too strange for mainstream people to fully commit to. But now, you've got a former president, sitting vice president, defense figures, and media insiders all circling it again. That's not the same environment we had 10 years ago. Something has shifted. And whether that shift is because the truth is coming out, or because the public is still being managed, that's a story worth watching. And then of course, we get the Truth Social post. Let's have a look at that. Based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, and unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. God bless America. Because with Trump especially, the exact wording matters. His tone matters, what he implies matters, and what he leaves vague also matters. And if you read it closely, it really does feel like he wants people to think there's something there. Now maybe that's because there is. Or maybe it's because he knows the UFO topic is one of the most emotionally loaded, culturally most powerful things you can attach yourself to politically. It really could be either, but either way, it keeps the fire burning. And right now, the fire is getting bigger. So what do you think here? Was Trump testing something real, or just a subject he knows people are hungry for? Because honestly, both are believable. Now, this is the next part that didn't get as much attention as I think it should have. And that usually means it's worth paying attention to. Because journalist Kristen Fisher was invited to tour private contractors working on space-related weapons and defense systems. And during that visit, she asked Secretary of War Pete Hegseth directly about Trump's request. And what makes this interesting isn't that we got some giant shocking answer, because we didn't. What makes it interesting is the answer wasn't dismissive. It suggested movement. Let's have a look at that clip.
3 days ago, President Trump directed you to begin the process of identifying and releasing the UFO and UAP files. I mean, did you ever think that you would be the Secretary of War in charge of potentially declassifying extraterrestrial life to the American people and the world?
I did not have that on my bingo card at all.
And are you prepared to do that now?
Of course. I mean, we've got our people working on it right now. I don't want to oversell how much time it will take. Right? We're digging in. We're going to be in full compliance with that executive order, eager to provide that for the president. So there'll be more coming on that as far as the process of what we'll do.
And what sort of time frame? Do you have any sense for how long this is going to take?
I don't have a time frame for you yet, but stand by. We'll get it for you.
And do you think aliens are real?
What?
Do you think aliens exist? Do you think they're real?
I get to do the review and find out along with you. One more?
One more, Mr. Secretary. The Director of National Intelligence said today that her office was going to begin the process of declassifying reports on extraterrestrial and alien life. I'm going back to these types of questions because the American people have wanted to know the answer to these questions for a very long time. And so I'm just curious if you think that, one, if this is the beginning of disclosure for the American people and the world, and two, if the Pentagon is actually prepared to start declassifying some of these things that might really shed some answers on this instead of keeping it secret.
We would love to. We'll work with the DNI, as we always do. I'm heartened to hear that she's doing that. President Trump has been committed to disclosure on lots of levels, and he's made it clear that he wants answers on this. He's given us a responsibility to do it. We're going to be a part of delivering that. It'll be a deliberative process. We want to make sure expectations are going to be high, right? I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, so we're going to take a little time to make sure we assess what this should look like and deliver for the president, for the American people.
And this is where I think people misunderstood how real disclosure would probably happen. Because people are still waiting for this fantasy version where someone rolls out a craft under bright lights and says, there you go, we've had this for 80 years. That was never likely. Real disclosure, if it happens, would probably look much more like this. Committees, contractors, partial acknowledgement, classified barriers, controlled language, and gradual normalization. In other words, boring on the surface, but huge underneath. And that's why moments like this matter, because they tell you machinery may actually be moving, even if it's not moving in a dramatic, cinematic way yet. And this is where I want to ask you something that sits at the heart of this whole episode. If disclosure is happening, who is actually driving it? Is it the president? Is it military pressure? Is it intelligence agencies losing control of the narrative? Is it the whistleblowers forcing movement? Or is it a coordinated rollout that's been planned for years? Because depending on which answer is true, the implications are completely different. And if that wasn't the strangest thing in this timeline, that would already be enough. But then this story takes a turn that makes it even more unsettling. Because now it's not just politics, it may also be religion. Or something even darker. because Vice President J.D. Vance has now publicly stepped into the UFO conversation. And what he said is genuinely important. Not just because of who he is, but because of what it suggests about where this conversation may be heading next. Vance has said that he wants to get to the bottom of what's really going on with UFOs and the files around them. And on its own, that's already notable. Because when someone that close to the top says they want answers, that tells you the subject is not being treated as a joke internally. But then he says something else, something that completely reframes the phenomenon. He suggests that what people call aliens may not actually be aliens at all, but something more like demons, or at the very least, something spiritual, something non-human. Something not easily explained through the standard nuts and bolts craft from another planet framework. Let's have a look at the clip.
You gonna release all the UFO files?
We're working on it. It's funny, when I came in, I was obsessed with the UFO files, and then you start getting really busy worrying about the economy and national security and things like that. But I've still got 3 more years as vice president. I will get to the bottom of the UFO files.
Okay. Have you peeked? Have you done a peek?
So I actually haven't. I have
full
not.
Independence Day.
I have not been able to spend enough time on this to really understand it, but I am going to. Trust me, I'm obsessed with this. I've already had a couple of times where I'm like, all right, we're going to Area 51. We're going out to New Mexico. We're going to sort of get to the bottom of this. And then the timing of the trip just didn't work out. But trust me, anybody who's curious about this, I'm more curious than anybody. And I've got 3 years of the very, very tippy top of the classification. I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
Okay, so you haven't been to Area 51 yet?
Not yet.
Some
Not
people
yet.
say they keep the UFOs in Ohio. You know, they might,
yeah, Hangar 18, Hangar 18, right?
I've
heard that as well, but I don't know. I haven't looked into it yet.
Okay, all right. Well, we're waiting for it. We saw aliens.gov.
And you know me.
We saw
You know me.
aliens.gov.
I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway, but that's a longer discussion.
Well, I can't let you go without a follow-up on that. Because Barack Obama is on this podcast and he goes, yeah, aliens are real, but like, here's where they're not. You know,
I did not.
And so Obama says, yes, aliens are, he gets asked point blank, are aliens real? Oh, yeah. And then he goes, but they're not at Area 51. And
well, where are they, bro?
Well, that's what he says. Right. There's a great question.
Trump
had to go save him, and he said he's going to
podcast.
declassify.
Okay.
So you think they're demons?
Well, look, I think that celestial beings who fly around, who do weird things to people, I think that the desire to describe everything celestial, everything is otherworldly, to describe it as aliens. I mean, every great world religion, including Christianity, the one that I believe in, has understood that there are weird things out there, and there are things that are very difficult to explain. And I naturally go, when I hear about sort of extra natural phenomenon, that's where I go to, is the Christian understanding that, you know, there's a lot of good out there, but there's also some evil out there. And I think that one of the devil's great tricks is to convince people he never existed.
And honestly, whether you agree with that or not, that is a massive shift in framing. Because suddenly this is not just a question of, are we alone in the universe? Now it becomes, what exactly are we dealing with? And that is a much deeper, weirder, and more uncomfortable question. Because this idea has been floating around the UFO world for a very long time. That maybe the phenomenon isn't purely extraterrestrial. Maybe it's interdimensional. Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe it interacts with our consciousness. Maybe it presents differently depending on the culture and belief. And if you zoom out, it's actually pretty wild how often these stories overlap. Ancient religious encounters, apparitions, visions, beings of light, entities that appear then disappear, messages from the unknown, fear, paralysis, even telepathy. A lot of this doesn't fit neatly into the Space Brothers from Zeta Reticuli version of UFO history. And I think that's why Vance's comments hit so hard. Because whether he's intended to or not, he's dragged one of the strangest, most controversial interpretations of the phenomenon into mainstream political discussion. And once that happens, you can't really put it back in the box. So let me ask you this. What if this isn't extraterrestrial at all? What if we've been misunderstanding the phenomenon from the very beginning? Because if that's even partially true, then disclosure may not just be shocking, it may be existential. It may force people to rethink religion, consciousness, the depths of reality, and even human history. And that's a very different kind of disclosure. Now, this next part I want to handle carefully. Because when real people disappear, that's not entertainment. But at the same time, it would be dishonest not to mention how strange some of these stories look in the current context. And one of the names that keeps surfacing is Major General William Neil McCasland. Now, if you've been around the UFO world for a while, that name rings bells. Because McCasland has long been associated in speculation circles with advanced aerospace programs, black budget technology, and the kinds of compartments that people believe sit around the UFO issue. He also ran Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is one of those names that never really leaves the Roswell conversation. Because for decades, Wright-Patterson has sat at the center of claims involving recovered material, bodies, classified analysis, long-term storage, and the quiet side of the cover-up narrative. That doesn't really mean every rumor is true, but it does mean the location has history. And then you look at the circumstances around his disappearance, and it starts to feel unsettling. He was reportedly hiking. He didn't take a phone or any of his personal belongings, but he remembered to take a gun and was armed. And when you hear these details, your brain immediately starts asking questions. Not because you want to force a conspiracy, but because the context is always loaded. Then you put aside the disappearance of Monica Reza in 2025. And again, I need to be responsible here. There is no confirmed evidence these disappearances are connected to UFO disclosure. That has to be said clearly. But when you're dealing with a topic already full of secrecy, compartmentalization, intelligence history, and alleged suppression, people are obviously going to connect the dots. And sometimes those dots turn out to be nothing, but sometimes they point to something uncomfortable. So this is where I throw it to you. Do you think some people know too much? Or do you think the UFO world has become so pattern hungry that we risk seeing connections where there is none? Because that's a real danger too. And if we're going to do this series properly, we need to stay curious without getting reckless. That matters to me, and I think it should matter to you too. Now let's zoom out all the way, because this is where the story starts to feel bigger than politics. This is where it starts to feel cultural, psychological, maybe even engineered. Because right in the middle of all this, we've got Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day due to land in June. And I don't think it's crazy at all to ask whether that timing matters. Because if governments or aligned institutions or media-adjacent influence networks ever wanted to reveal something this world-changing, you just wouldn't tell the people. You'd prepare them, you'd soften them up, you'd let them emotionally metabolize the idea before asking them to confront it intellectually. And that's exactly what Hollywood has always been good at. not just entertainment, conditioning, myth building, normalization, framing, expectation management. And if there's one filmmaker on Earth who has helped shape how people imagine contact, it's Spielberg. So when you place his project in June, and then Roswell sits in July, and all this political chatter is happening now, I don't think it's irresponsible to ask, are we watching narrative sequencing? Not proof, but pattern. And sometimes pattern is the first thing you notice before the truth becomes obvious. Because just look at the sequence. Obama reopens the subject, Trump calls it classified, Lara Trump hints at something coming, Roswell date rumours start surfacing, Hegseth confirms movement, Vance reframes the phenomenon, Spielberg drops a major disclosure-themed film just before Roswell. If all that's random, it's a pretty ridiculous coincidence. And I don't know about you, but I've reached a point where I'm at least willing to say something is moving. I just don't know yet whether it's the truth or theatre. And maybe right now, it's a bit of both. So what do you think? Are we being prepared for disclosure? Or are we being walked through a carefully managed narrative? Because there's a difference, a big one. And if you made it this far into the episode, hit the like on the video and let me know if this format works. Because if it does, I'll keep doing these and we'll build Decoded into something seriously good. And if you want to help shape where this goes to next, drop your topic suggestions below, because I've already got a list going. So where do I think this goes? Honestly, I think we're staring at two possible disclosure paths right now. And depending on what happens over the next few months, we're going to find out which one we're in. So the first one is Trump blows the lid off it all. This is the version people have dreamed about for decades. The big moment. The one where a president or a former president stands up and says the words everyone's been waiting to hear. We are not alone. No more hints, no more games, no more we can neither confirm nor deny. Just truth, or at least the beginning of it. And if this happens, if Trump does have something ready to say, if Roswell is the chosen date, and if pieces we're seeing now are all part of a deliberate lead-up, then maybe that's exactly what this is going to be. Maybe all of this, the comments, the clips, the classified language, the movie timing, the political signaling, is all laying the runway for the biggest reveal of our lifetime. And if this happens, everything changes. Not just science, not just religion, not just politics, us. How we see ourselves, how we see the universe, how we interpret our history, and how we understand consciousness, life, and what it means to actually be human. That would be the kind of moment people would still be talking about in 500 years. And if it happens, we're all living through it right now. The second scenario is where the truth comes out, but not as cleanly. And honestly, it's probably more of a realistic one. Because what if there is no big speech, no clean reveal? What if instead the truth comes out in a way difficult truths usually come out? They're messy. They're through leaks, through hearings, through whistleblowers, through denials, through contradictions, through media manipulation, through people fighting to drag the information out into the light. While we have these powerful systems trying to keep it controlled. And if that's the path we're on, then disclosure still happens. But not as a gift, but as a struggle. A long, frustrating, uneven fight between secrecy and the people trying to crack it open. Honestly, that version may fit this topic better than anything else, because UFO history has never been clean. It's never been simple. It's never been one straight line from question to answer. It's always been a maze, a wall between what's seen and what's admitted. So maybe the real question isn't just, are we getting disclosure? Maybe the real question is, what kind of disclosure are we actually going to get? Are we going to get the clean version or the chaotic one? The official speech or the slow unraveling? Because right now, I genuinely think we could be watching the beginning of either. And if we are, then the story is only just getting started. So that said, I want to know what you think. I don't want to put up a poll for this episode because I just want you guys to drop as many comments as you can below. I'm hoping there's some real gold there that I can take away and work on another episode of Decoded for you with. So in the comments, I want you to tell me what happens next. And if you want to keep going on this topic, watch my episode on Spielberg next. Because if Disclosure Day turns out to be part of a wider soft rollout, that film may be more important than we realize. And if you haven't seen it yet, I think it's the perfect companion for this one. As always, I'm Mike. I'll catch you guys next time. Be sure to stay curious and share what you know with those that are happy to listen. I'll see you then.